Welcome to Roots and Rishte, a podcast focused on all things South Asian mental health.
We are your co-hosts, two psychologists in the field who are also work besties, wanting to invite you to join us as we speak about patterns and dynamics we see in our clinical work.
We want to have the serious conversations, the topics which are taboo and whispered about, but we also want to celebrate the joys and wins that we experience on a daily basis.
There will be practical applications we hope you can implement in your day-to-day life, which is not like your typical auntie's advice. And just a quick disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute as a therapeutic relationship or therapeutic advice. Should you want to work with us, please reach out. Welcome to Roots and Rishte podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about self-care.
Yes. Hi, Ambreen.
Hi, Simrat.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Happy to be here. We're talking about self-care from a South Asian perspective today. And in honor of that, we thought it'd be nice to be kind of comfy and representing a little bit what self-care means to us. And so just a quick shout out. I am wearing a gratitude sweatshirt from the Gratitude Company, an amazing company. I believe they're Toronto-based. They're doing so much for mental health awareness and just their whole idea is about slowing down and kind of finding the gratitude. And so on the sleeve, what are you grateful for? It's always a good reminder.
And while mine is not as gratitude fulfilled as this one, I'm wearing my sweatshirt in honor of Harry Potter and in honor of my love of reading and really using reading as my guide to self-care.
Yes. But what we want to talk about today is self-care beyond kind of maybe what people think self-care is, right? And so
you mean it's not bubble baths and like candles?
I mean, it could be, right? I think that's part of it, but I think it's not only bubble baths and candles, right? And I think a lot of times when people think about self-care, that's kind of where they stop. And so we want to talk about, what does actual self-care look like? And then also from a South Asian context, like how can we sort of modify self-care to kind of meet our needs, but also, kind of like meet sort of those like cultural components of self-care, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to highlight the differences between self-care as a way to rest versus self-care as a way to restore, right?
Yes.
Because we can be resting, but not restored.
Yes.
Right?
So I talk about this with my clients all the time, rest versus restoration, right? And so a lot of times when people are feeling somewhat depleted or they're feeling tired, they'll find themselves resting, right? Like they'll literally take naps in the daytime or they'll kind of sleep in a little bit more, but it doesn't actually make them feel any better. Like the fatigue continues or the depletion kind of continues. Yeah. And then we talk about the idea of restoration, right? What if instead of taking that nap, you were to read a book or go for a walk or call a friend or meet up with a friend for coffee? It has a different activating energy. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes the depletion that we feel, our body needs that activating energy as opposed to just kind of like the shutting down of the rest. Yeah. So rest is necessary, but it's not always the solution.
And I think the examples that we can give too here are quite personal too, right? When we go on vacation with our children, it's wonderful. It's great. As real as I can be about it. And it's restful. But I don't know that I'm restored coming back, right? Yes. Sometimes we're doing the same exact thing that we're doing here with less support in a different country, in a different place altogether, right? Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It can be important and resting to have that as a family, but it doesn't mean you're restored, right?
Yes. And I mean, in fairness, sometimes you are also not rested.
Right? No, you are not, right?
Yeah.
But you can actually go out for let's say a dinner with your girlfriends and girlfriends that you really find true connections to you, right? And actually walk away from that 2-hour visit feeling a lot more restored than you would have been from a 7-day restful vacation, family vacation, right?
Yeah. And so really when we're talking about self-care, we are talking about the idea of sort of setting boundaries, right? We're talking about being able to say no without sort of that sense of guilt or the debilitating guilt.
Yeah. And I think there's so many barriers to actually true self-care that leads to restoration, right? Because, we get a lot of that messaging that, taking time for yourself or taking breaks is frowned upon, right? We should always be productive. We should always be achieving something. We should always be working towards something, right? So, for example, we did a lot of studying growing up. We had to do a lot of reading and stuff like that. And I cannot tell you how attractive it made not reading for school to me.
Yeah.
And I would just, like, it became maladaptive to a point where it would be like, I'm reading constantly, but because that's, like, fulfilling to me and I'm avoiding all of this other stuff, right? So, like, this is, like, the challenges with self-care is, like, you know, when we don't allow it for ourselves, it can become maladaptive.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And that can lead to burnout, and it can lead to some of like that chronic anxiety that we've spoken about in the past. I think it's also challenging when we don't see it kind of prioritized around, especially growing up, right? Yeah. And once again, this is kind of coming from a survival perspective. But like my dad doesn't rest, right? And he's almost 70 and he is working 6 days a week and he's working a lot and he's constantly busy. He decided several months ago that he was going to take Saturdays off. It lasted a week. And then the following Saturday, he went to work for half day. And then the following Saturday, he was back full time. But when you don't see it around you as well, sometimes there can almost kind of be a sense of guilt. And so like there are times where like, for example, we'll go away on vacation. And if we do it like without my parents, for example, I feel really bad about it, right? Because it's kind of like I want them to be able to experience it as well. And so sometimes not seeing it modeled around you can make it difficult to access it for yourself.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is like we're working up against these like perspectives around self-care. And like also I think there's a lot of like trending items around self-care of what it looks like. It should look like a bubble bath, or it should look, and it can. Yeah. It should look like the 7-day vacation, and it can, right? But is it actually restoring you? Is it actually giving you that like, oh, that vibe of like, oh, I feel like a renewed person, right?
Yeah. And like there's expanded versions of what self-care looks like, right? So like even if we're kind of thinking of it from a South Asian lens, I mean, and this could be from other lenses as well, but for some people it might be meditation and it might be prayer, for example, right? And that might be sort of their time to just really sit with their body and be incredibly mindful, be very present. Right. And that can be part of their self-care routine.
And I think there's this perspective too that we kind of also have to touch upon, right? Where self-care can be looked upon as a privilege, right? Like, oh, it's a privilege rather than a necessity of survival.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But yes, I agree with that. But I think the messaging that we want other people, or we just want everybody to be able to understand is, you know, you don't have to earn rest.
Right.
Like, rest is a right.
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 Yeah. Like you need it. You need it. You absolutely need it to function, to survive, to exist, to do the basic necessities of anything.
Yeah.
So I think just to even kind of like expand on this a little bit more, right? I think there's this strong feeling of guilt that comes from taking the time to do self-care, right? It can feel like we're letting people down. It can feel like, you know, we're not allowed to have that space for ourselves. It can feel like we need to keep going in the direction that we're going in, right? Like, how can we let others down? Just like that guilt of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to kind of understand this from a perspective of like, you know, this is not about like, do you deserve self-care? This is really about the idea of self-care being a means of survival, right? Like self-care is something that we need to be able to give to ourselves so that we can rise to the occasion of like supporting everything else around us.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And when we talk about things like burnout or that high functioning sort of depression as well, self-care becomes such an important part of the recovery. And so what happens is if we're not preventative with that, then it has to be kind of it like becomes necessity, right? But self-care can be part of the preventative part of it. So if you're able to prioritize, utilize self-care. Yeah. And once again, we're not talking about like getting in a bubble bath if that's not your jam, right?
Right. Or journaling if that's not your jam, right?
Maybe it's playing, you know, pick up with your friends on Friday night or reading a book, right?
Right. And I think I always say this to clients too, right? Like, you know, if you don't take a break, your body will force you to take a break.
Yeah.
Right? Like your body will shut down at some point because it absolutely needs a rest. And then the problem with that is that the rest is not at your timetable and it's not when you need it, but now you're depleted to a degree where that rest is absolutely necessary for you to even just function.
Yeah.
Right?
And I don't know about you. I'm sure you're seeing this as well, but kind of even in the clinical practice, there's so many people who are getting to that point where they're being forced to go on stress leaves from work. Right. And we talked so much like in all this whole season about, just life is lifing and all these cultural sort of stressors and expectations and all of that. The pandemic was a huge stressor, and it like activated our bodies to a very chronic degree almost, right? Like it was a constant stressor that we didn't have much reprieve from for a really long time. And I think the implications of that is what's kind of following, like is what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
So when people are kind of staying at the same level of productivity or busyness without prioritizing their own regulation, because that's what self-care is. Self-care is your own regulation. It's regulating your nervous system. It's taking that exhale. It's decompressing.
Right.
And if people aren't doing that, then it adds up, the compound effect of it.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing very, very much so the implications of that.
Yeah. And, I think we need to kind of step away from the idea that self-care needs to look like this like grand activity of sorts, or this like extra thing of sorts, right? Self-care is more about restoration than it is about grand, right? Like it is really this idea that perhaps we can, like for me, I always imagine my self-care going back to my parents' house, right? We have, and we're in California, so we have a swing in our backyard, right? And my self-care was every morning to sit with my cup of coffee outside.
I love that.
Right? And it was just this act of sitting with my coffee and starting my day that way with like the nice little breeze, the sunshine, all of that, that I would just feel like, I feel good.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all I needed, right?
Yeah. And it's possible to find like pockets of opportunity even in the busyness of life, right? And so whether that is like taking 5 minutes before you go to sleep to do your skincare routine, right? And there is something about kind of like, like you're
washing the day.
Exactly.
Yes.
Washing the day away, but you're also kind of like comforting yourself. You're regulating your own sort of nervous system by just the movements of it all. And like pockets of time. It's like so going like it doesn't have to be something so grand, right?
Right.
It's intentional.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a moment to yourself. Right?
Yeah, when we think of kind of like what self-care looks like from a cultural standpoint, right? One of the things that comes to my mind is just kind of like the oil in your hair, right? Like getting like that polish kind of in your hair. And one of my things is like if I need it, so there's been a couple times in my life where, just things have happened. And the most restorative part of like my recovery was getting a polish done by my dad, right? And it's just like oil in your hair, and there's just something so loving about it. So like that's one way, like culturally, that you can kind of take care of yourself, or an expression of self-care.
Right. Or sitting with your cup of chai, or preparing your favorite like Southeast Asian dinner, right? And there's so many different ways to like do this. And you can journal, you can do the bubble bath. But you can also talk to your cousin, your aunt, or someone that you find is restorative for you.
Yeah. Movement. It can be more sort of like, more intense movement. It could be very gentle movement, but even kind of movement for your body. Yoga, for example. Going back to the idea of like prayer and meditation and how that can be, when we talk about restorative, like sometimes being in a congregation can be really restorative. There's something about that energy that's really transferable.
Absolutely. And I think like the idea of self-care is that it needs to be embedded in your day-to-day life, embedded in your like routines, embedded in the ways that you function, because without those like checkpoints or those like markers of self-care, we then don't have the moments already inside of our like schedules to like have them, right? And I think it's so important that we continue to have those moments readily available to us regardless of our routine.
Yeah. And so it being embedded in, but then also like going with the intentionality, like we were talking a little bit outside of this episode about like taking a little bit of time off work in the week, right? Like maybe taking a half day off or taking a day off in the week. And so sometimes, particularly based on how a person's feeling, like you might need a more extended version of just kind of what is already happening.
Yeah. And something that I do is really kind of take a look at my schedule month to month. And like wherever I see like gaps, I actually just schedule the time off. And I just go, I'm not booking anybody else that day, right? Or I'm not going to do anything else that day, because you just need the day to yourself.
Yeah. I think one of the things when we talk about self-care is there is this intentionality that you're stepping away and you're focusing on your own wellness and going back to the idea of like it can feel really guilt-inducing. I'm just kind of thinking of, like the overworked mom, right? If like it's a mom who's maybe working outside the home as well and then has a whole household to take care of, there's childcare, there's a marriage, potentially in-laws, own parents, like there's so much that it can feel hard to sort of to kind of carve out that time. But once again, that's the compound effect, right? And so saying no to something for your own wellness, being able to kind of learn how to set that boundary.
And I think we have to start challenging the notion around glorifying the struggle.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because like there's this whole piece of like, well, so-and-so does this, and this, and this, right? And like, you have so much like support, or you have so much like this or that or whatever, right? Like, oh, you're not allowed to voice your struggles or things like that, right? Like there's this glorification of like, we just have to bear the burdens with a smile, right? And that's not the case. Like, this is just not true. It's not healthy for us to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, we may not be able to do anything about the struggles that we have, but we can actually do something about taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. In my first session with all my clients, we kind of do that, the initial consultation. And at the end, I always ask, like, what are your coping strategies? What are your self-care sort of activities? And the amount of clients who are like unable to identify them for themselves, or what I hear a lot is I used to love walking. I used to love journaling. I used to love going out with friends. I used to love working out. But I don't do that anymore. Right. And so I think in midst of like kind of everything and all the layers and all the parts of us, it becomes easy to kind of put ourselves at the last. But at the same time, we're the ones who are going to experience that depletion and the burnout and all of that.
Right. And I think we have to also be okay with challenging the notion around like taking the time for yourself is just as important as everything else, right? And like, it's okay. Like somebody's going to have a perspective. Somebody's going to have an opinion. Somebody's going to say like, this is, like you do too much of this or you do too much of that, whatever, right? Like, and I think we have to be okay with being able to say like, listen, that's what I need for my self-care.
Yeah. Right? And easier said than done.
Absolutely.
In a lot of dynamics, much easier said than done. But like for an example, I'll have a client who's like worried about like my mother-in-law will judge me if I go for a walk or if I leave the house and it's kind of the idea of like, well, you feel like she's judging you every other moment anyways. So like, why not do something for yourself? Like if it's not actually going to change what kind of like the dynamic is, but it could help you build your capacity, feel a little bit more restored. Like how can you start to slowly prioritize that?
Absolutely. So I think a great example of having to like getting to a point where you absolutely need the self-care, for example, like I've come across several situations where somebody is now coming in for treatment, okay, and they're on leave from work. They're not able to function. Can't get out of bed. Right? And they have the anxiety, the depression, all of those diagnoses now, right? The worrying thoughts, the ruminating thoughts, racing thoughts, can't sleep, right? And how many people do we know or how many people have we seen that fit this bill? So many, right? And then they've come to a point where they absolutely need a reprieve from something. And what does that reprieve look like? Having to go on leave from work, right? And work is like our livelihood. Work is supposed to be, you know what I mean? Like this is a place that we're interacting in and day out. We can't function there. We can't function with our family, but we have to survive with our family, right? So now we're kind of thinking about this. Like, this is like, what is kind of the root of some of these issues? And of course, like so much of this can be global. So much of this can be like, related to other things, other relationships, other pieces of this, right? But the bottom line, like the ultimate piece that kind of comes down to it is a crux of like not being able to care for ourselves.
Right? That's a common denominator that you'll kind of like, no matter what the other outside stressors are.
And sometimes those are like the pieces that cover, right? Like we talked about like in previous episodes, we've talked about the anger being like the secondary emotion and it looks like a primary emotion that covers something, right? This is it, right? Like when we get to a place of burnout, like total burnout, this is like all of these other factors are like the extenuating factors that are covering the ultimate piece of burnout, the ultimate piece of the lack of self-care.
And self-care in an example like this starts so basic, right?
So
like
basic.
It's like literally like
brush your teeth.
Exactly.
Basic.
Exactly. And even that, it's like, in 7 days a week, do you feel like you could try 2 days to take a shower, right? It's very basic.
And in this kind of stuff, like I'm not even doing trauma work at this point, right? Like I'm just doing, listen, let's just get you to brush your teeth. Right? Take care of your hygiene. right? And I think the thing is like we don't want to get to this point, but we get there because we are burnt out.
Yeah. So this is an extreme example, but unfortunately, it's also a common example. And so, someone listening to this might kind of be like, okay, that seems a little bit intense, but like we're seeing people who fully functional and were living
high functioning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were living relatively fulfilled lives, and then various stressors and not being able to prioritize some of their own wellness over time, the compound effect led to this.
Yeah. Like we talk about like parents getting ill. We talk about like, divorce or, challenging relationships or sibling dynamics or whatever, but there's extenuating factors that now start to influence and then you just can't function anymore, right?
Yeah.
And this can happen to you. This can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the thing. That's exactly the thing. Like, when we stop prioritizing our self-care, this happens.
Yeah. And sometimes self-care, it's not completely enjoyable.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes it is about like going and doing that workout, even if you don't want to do that workout because it's good for your physical health and it's good for your wellness. And chances are probably afterwards you're going to feel pretty satisfied.
Yeah.
But it's not always the complete relaxation or the complete like leaning into the enjoyment of it. No. But it's the purpose of it.
And I will tell you, like, I know that you know this, like, I have a workout routine that I like religiously follow.
Yeah.
And I have to do that because it's like the thing that works for me, right? And the way I got myself to do it was I would book my classes.
Yeah.
And then I would tell myself, because I would wake up in the morning and I'd be like, I'm too tired. I'm going to cancel tomorrow's class. I couldn't cancel today's class because I didn't want to pay the no-show fee. So that was my motivating factor. I was like, not paying the no-show fee. So I'm going, okay? Yeah. And then I would get up, I would go, and I would tell myself that I'm going to cancel the next day after the workout because I want to sleep in, okay? And I would tell myself this every day for months, okay? Yeah. And what would happen is I would go and work out. Suddenly I'd feel so good. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll go tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I used to do this every day. Yeah. Every day. And sometimes that's exactly what you kind of have to do is that cognitive battle with yourself, right?
Yeah, but it's the intentional showing up for yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, find what works, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many elements of like what it could be, right?
Yeah.
Even like hydration is like part of self-care.
Just water. Just straight water. Yeah.
We talk about pillars of wellness, right? Rest, movement, nourishment, social connections. Like all those are part of self-care as well. And I feel like self-care in a way has almost kind of become this term,
buzzword,
like a buzzword.
Yeah.
But like I think like self-care is just like literally like wellness, right? Like, yeah. Like it doesn't have to be like you were saying.
What keeps you well?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's like, once again, could be spiritual, could be emotional, could be physical, could be, ideally we want a little bit of, everything that feels good for you. Yeah. So once again, maybe some guilt to navigate and maybe some discomfort that you have to overcome. But the goal is how can you show up for yourself and show up for the people around you in a more sort of optimal version.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just say it, right? The Not Your Auntie's advice today is take a break, beta.
Thank you for joining us for season 1 of Roots and Rishte podcast.
We are so excited that you were able to join us and you're with us on this journey. Please send us your thoughts, your feedback, things you want to hear more of, things you'd like us to talk about. We're more than happy to hear from you.
We have some exciting things coming up. Season 2, we are going to focus on marriage and relationships. We're going to talk about premarital sort of, conversations that need to happen. We're going to talk about navigating even all of it, right? Navigating in-laws, navigating partnerships, navigating parenthood. So there's a lot coming up in season 2. And let us know if there's anything you would like us to talk about next season. And we'll see you soon.
All right, we finished season 1.